Thank you. Thank you very much, Judy. I'm delighted to be here. My biggest challenge is how I'm going to stick to time. I have so much that I would like to share. In terms of how to support independence in the home, I've taken the home as being wherever people living with dementia are being supported and cared for. The principles are all the same, whether we're looking at people in a residential aged care community or whether we're looking at people in their own family home living with families. It's the same principle. I do want to start by saying that it is Dr. Montessori's philosophy that makes a perfect mission statement for aged care. And it's really about independence, it's about meaningful engagement, it's about people feeling that they matter and having a reason to get out of bed every day. It's also about people being able to make meaningful contributions to their community. Having worked in aged care for many, many years, I have always been so troubled and upset when I hear elderly people express a desire to go to the great yonder rather than wake up the next day because they feel that they don't matter anymore, that they haven't got a place. One man said to me in Adelaide a number of years ago, he said, you know, I'm breathing air that should be being used by younger people. I'm past my use-by date. And whenever I hear those sorts of comments from our elders, it just breaks my heart a little more, and I think, what have we done to aged care? What have we done to our elders when that is a better alternative for them? So my work really is about trying to change the face of aged care one step at a time around the world and give our elders the best life they can have until the end, rather than seeing aged care as almost the end. There's nothing after this. So when we talk about independence and when we talk about the prepared environment, it's a very different prepared environment to the prepared environment of a classroom, for example, and a prepared environment that you're familiar with. But when we're talking about independence for elders, it's about looking at the environment and how do we change the environment to support and enable people, particularly people living with dementia, to be the best that they can be. So we do that by creating a prepared environment that covers all of those areas. But what staff and family members are an important part of the prepared environment. And I certainly think that we need to work with our staff and our families to enable independence to be a reality for the people that we're privileged to support or to care for. And certainly Dr. Montessori said that the prepared environment is also about caring and being caring for others as well as being cared for. And, you know, one of the wonderful things that we see happen when we put Montessori in place for older people is that we see older people who function at a higher level than somebody else helping the people who are more impaired. Just like you all see in your classrooms with the older children helping younger children. Exactly the same thing happens in our work with older people. And it's about enhancing people's ability to do things for themselves. I just want to share this photo with you. This is from a fabulous Montessori Day Centre in Japan. And this is just such a beautiful photo of one lady with a dementia caring for another lady with more advanced dementia. And that is just what you see when we put in Montessori environments in aged care. It is just amazing. It doesn't matter how impaired people are, they will always stand up and help somebody else, even if it's just passing things at the dinner table. And it's quite wonderful to see things like this. Okay, now Dr. Montessori said that the first aim of the prepared environment is, as far as it is possible, to render the growing child independent of the adult. So what we say in our work is that the first aim of the prepared environment is, as far as it is possible, to render the older adult as independent as possible and supporting them to be the best that they can be. Now, I'm going to start off just by saying that somebody in the world develops dementia every 3 seconds. In a room this size, in a room of people this size, there are 2, 3, maybe 4 of you that are going to get dementia. It's not a matter of if. There will be that number of people in this room who will develop dementia. So we all have a vested interest in aged care. Even though you may see it as something far away from you, we all have a vested interest. If you have not been touched by dementia personally at this stage in your life, be assured that you will be, either by somebody that you love, by somebody you know, a friend, or by being your own journey with dementia. So they say, just to bring it into reality, they say that the physiological changes that occur in the brain actually start occurring 30 years before any outward sign. Now think about that. That means that for half of us, if not more than half of us, if you are going to get dementia, the changes have already started in your brain. That's quite scary. So, sometimes I think that people think that dementia is something that they know somebody, their grandmother had it, but, we need to realise that it could be our journey. So, every 3 seconds, I think in Australia it's something like 250 people, are being diagnosed with dementia. It's a huge issue. For those of you who aren't familiar with dementia, there are 130 different causes of dementia, 130. And of course, one of the most significant changes that people see is a change in memory. There are types of dementia where memory is not the first symptom, but generally speaking, for the most common types of dementia that we're familiar with and you've probably heard of, such as Alzheimer's disease, then memory is one of the first things. But it affects so many things. The ability to problem solve, the ability to intellectual decline. I remember going and picking up a lady who lived at home by herself. Interestingly enough, I was saying to somebody over the last couple of days, my head's full of trivia. The people who survive in the community the longest, living in the community in their own home the longest, are actually people who live by themselves. And people are often surprised about that. But the reason why they survive the longest before placement is that their changed behaviour does not impact on anybody. So it doesn't matter that they're up all night wandering, or they're turning lights on and off, or they're, going to the toilet in inappropriate places, because there's nobody else that behaviour affects. And so hence that's why we see that. The people who live the second longest in the community are those that actually live with spouse, that live with partners. So they're the next group. But this is something to remember. The people who survive the shortest period of time living in the community before placement are those that live with daughter-in-laws. So there's a lesson there. There's a lesson there. don't live with the daughter-in-law. Yes.
I'm sorry, we have 2 chairs here, we have a couch, we have 2 chairs in case you would like to sit. Okay.
Okay. Anyway, I went to pick up a lady and we dropped her off the day before, and she lived by herself, and she came to our little day centre. And I went to get her the next day, and I got out of the bus to walk up her path, and there was a trickle or a flood of water coming down under a front door, down the steps, down the path and into the gutter. Obviously something major was wrong. So I went and knocked on her door, and she answered the door and she said, "I'm so glad you're here." She said, "I've got water everywhere." And what had happened was that the afternoon when we'd taken her back to her home, she had gone into the bathroom to wash her hands, and she put the plug in the sink, right? So she put the plug in the sink and she turned on the tap to wash her hands. And the washer in the tap went, and she couldn't turn the tap off. Now you and I would pull the plug out. She couldn't problem solve. So she couldn't turn the tap off, and she was unable to think, I need to pull the plug out and there wouldn't be a problem. So inability to problem solve can be a major impairment for people, because you and I would be able to solve those things people living with dementia can't. So if you've seen one person with dementia, you've seen exactly that, one person with dementia. It depends entirely on the parts of the brain that are affected as to what we're going to see with people, and every person is unique, and every person will have their own set of symptoms, and that's sometimes why it can be a challenge to care for people, because often our industry wants to put everybody in the one basket. You live with dementia, this is how you're going to be treated, this is what we're going to do with you. And it doesn't fit like that. You know, one size doesn't fit all. So anyway, that's a little bit about dementia. But when we talk about supporting independence, we have to start with the staff and with care partners, whether they're families or people in care. And probably the biggest challenge that I have in my work is to change up here, is to change attitudes towards the people that we're privileged to provide support for and care for. And that's the hardest thing. A lot of Montessori, a lot of the Montessori principles, a lot of the way we work, it's just common sense. It's what we'd all want. It's how we'd all like to be treated. And yet somehow, once that diagnosis of dementia is made, people lose their ability to make decisions, to be independent, people speak for them, people do for them. And so if we're talking about independence, we have to first of all change up here, so that the way we support people is with a respectful and kind focus on enabling them to have the best day and to live the best life, really. Now, dementia is associated with a whole lot of disability. We can't change that. We can't change that. We have to work around it, and we've got to support it, but we can't change it. There is a lot of actual disability associated with a diagnosis of dementia. What worries me far more is not actual disability, but excess disability. And excess disability is what happens when we overcare for people. We do for people what they're able to do themselves. I always say, people living with dementia have so many losses. There are so many things they can't do. Please don't do the things that they can do. Enable them to do it. Family carers, out of no intention to rob people, but out of love, overcare. They do things for people because they know the challenges that people living with dementia can have. So they start taking over doing things. So a lot of our work is not just in care communities, but working with families to understand the importance of supporting independence, keeping people able to do things for as long as possible. Now, dementia is progressive. For example, Alzheimer's disease, the average length of time between diagnosis and death is 7 years. That's very much like how long's a piece of string. You know, I've cared for a lady who was supported by a husband for 23 years. And I've also cared for somebody who passed away very quickly within months. So, but, you know, there is a lot of time. And if we're continually robbing people of what they can do, they can end up very impaired and needing total support by everybody around them. You know, it's just so important to keep people ambulant, so important to keep people able to do things. Now, how do we create excess disability when we overcare? When we use a wheelchair to take somebody to a dining room or to take somebody, you know, for a walk in the garden. We use a wheelchair because it is quicker than them walking themselves. So we use a wheelchair. Or we dress somebody because it is quicker than them dressing themselves. They can dress themselves in most cases, but because of the time it takes them, because they're slow, it becomes much easier and quicker to do it yourself. So a lot of our work is working with families and carers to say, allow people. I think Dr. Montessori said, the more you do for me, the more you take from me. It is so true in aged care. So the first part of the prepared environment that we need to get right to promote independence is attitudes of the people who are working with people. In aged care, it's often about what's easier for the staff. In family homes, it can be what's easier for families. I'll give you an example. I was working with a man living with dementia who lived with his wife. And every night for all of their married life, they'd done the dishes together. And it was a time as a couple that they would, you know, share stories about their day, discuss the children and things like that. And she would always wash up, and his job was just to dry up and to put things away. And that's what they'd done all of their married life. And now he's living with dementia, and I went to see her and she was upset, and she said, it's easier now, I just leave him in the lounge room. And he says, well, I'll come and help you. And she says, no, Jack, you just stay there and watch the news. And she said to me, he drives me mad because he's forgotten where things go. And so everything he wipes up, he's then saying, now, where does this go? And she said, it absolutely drives me mad. I said, well, we can fix that. It's such a shame if it's something you've always done. So look through a different goggle. So what we did, I said to her, what we need to do is label your cupboards. If you put labels on your cupboards and let him know that the cups go here and the plates go there and the glasses go there, then you're not going to have that constant repetition about what do I do now, where does this go? So, you know, supporting independence by looking at the environment and enabling people to keep doing what they've always done. And sometimes it's tweaking, such as with signage. A lovely Italian man that I looked after was the head of the family. And they had a large family, and his wife would often cook a big meal on a Sunday, and everybody would come, and it was a family gathering that happened regularly. And he was living with dementia, and his role was to open the front door. When his wife would be preparing the meal and whatever, when they knocked on the door, he would go and he'd welcome his family, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, in-laws and whatever, into his home. And this was fine until his dementia progressed to the point that he didn't know who the people were that were coming into his home. And so what happened was that he was becoming aggressive. And so he'd start yelling and getting very agitated at these people coming in and get out, you know, of my home. And his wife was devastated, and she was crying, saying, Anne, I'm going to have to stop the family from coming for meals because he's just getting so agitated and distressed. I said, well, let's think about it. His role has always been to welcome people. That's what he does as the head of the family. But the problem is that he no longer knows, particularly grandchildren, great-grandchildren and in-laws. He's lost that information. So what we're going to do is support it. So what we did, or what I helped her create, were a set of name badges that for every family member, and it said, you know, Joshua, my grandson, Mary, my daughter. And so it went through all the family members, and they had a veranda, a porch outside their front door. We put all the name badges in a container on the porch, and the family were instructed that before they were to knock on the door, they'd have to go through, find their name badge, put it on, and then knock on the door. Problem solved, because he was able to open the door and he was able to read Joshua, my grandson. And he could then say, hello, Joshua, you know, and do what he'd always done. Simple strategies to support independence and to support self-esteem and roles that people have always had. And it's very easy to take those things away because of somebody living with dementia, rather than thinking, okay, how do we support those things to continue? So excess disability is one of the biggest issues when we're talking about maintenance of independence for people. Now, we work on a 4W model in our work, and it's basically who and the 3 whats. You know, we've known for a long, long time about the importance of knowing the person behind the dementia, of knowing who you're caring for. And particularly for professional carers, we need to know people's stories. And every one of us has a life story, and our stories are what create or what make us who we are today. And as our life continues, and if you are going to be living with dementia or as an elderly person, then our life story influences what everybody else sees and the journey that we take. So, you know, who people are is so important. And, you know, what are people's strengths? We're very, very good at looking at what people can't do. We're very good at judging elderly people or anybody with a disability or anybody, you know, who is elderly, not just people living with dementia. We're very good at looking at what people can't do. And for many care communities who are funded through government organisations, the funding that they get is influenced by how impaired somebody is and what people can't do. So when we talk about a Montessori model, our Montessori model is based on strengths, and it's based on what can people do. Rather, we are very familiar with what they can't do, but what advantages or what strengths do they have? And how can we use those strengths to provide independence, self-esteem and quality of life for people? They're all linked. You can't separate one out. They're all interlinked. So, you know, who is the person? What are their needs become really important. You know, somebody, if they're losing the ability to know their family members, one of the saddest things with people living with dementia is that often they can get to the point where they forget who their family are. Now that's extremely tragic for family members and also for the person who is living with dementia. I was doing a workshop up in Queensland, and we go around the room and say, who are you and what are you doing here and what would you like to learn? And there was a fellow sitting right down the back who he didn't look like he really belonged. And anyway, I got to him and I said, sir, tell me who you are and why you're here. And he said, oh, well, I've just come in because I'm hoping you can help me. my mother is living with dementia, and she's got 2 children, myself and my sister, and he said, I'm frightened that she's going to die without knowing who we are and without knowing that we love her. And he said, I'm here to see, is there anything at all that you can offer that might stop that from happening? I said, oh, that you're easily fixed. I wish every problem I had or that was presented was as easy as that. So easy. So what he did was he took photos of all the family members, and I said, so from shoulders up a photo, and you print out who they are, the name and who they are. She was living in care, and I said, when you go, put all the photos up on her bedroom wall. And underneath each photo, you're going to put a Velcro dot. And the activity is she draws the name of the person out of the bowl, and she has to match the name to the picture. And you leave those up until the next person comes and visits her. They take them all down, put them back in the bowl, and then you do it again. And that is how she maintained the knowledge of who her family were. Simple Montessori activity. And many months later I got an email to say, Anne, just want to let you know that my mum passed away last week. He said, but it's actually not that I want to tell you. He said, I want to tell you that she passed away never forgetting who we were or that we loved her. So I always say that, you know, our ability to work in a Montessori way and to change how we view things is so powerful and has can have such a profound outcome for families and for people living with dementia. It is just such a gift that we have if we just think about what people's needs are and how do we meet those needs. Now, the reason why those names under the photos worked was every time she looked at it, she is learning. She is learning. This is what Sally looks like. This is what Dan looks like. And that's got to do with an understanding about procedural memory and repetition priming. And I'll talk about that a bit later. I think I'm going to leave it there. So anyway, so who is the person and what are their needs? I always look at what is the most important thing for a person? Sometimes it's about knowing families. Sometimes it's about being able to continue to feed yourself. How many of you would like to be fed? You know, how many of us would like to be fed? For a lot of people with dementia, they lose the ability to feed themselves. And when they lose that, they've lost a tiny bit of their personhood. They've certainly lost a lot of independence. So again, working in a Montessori way, we can keep those skills for as long as possible for people. You know, it's no point of seeing what people's needs are without doing something about it. You know, I often go into care communities and we've got people with dementia saying, what do I do now? What do I do now? Where's my room? Where's my room? And the staff do nothing about it. If you've got people with what we call repetitive questioning, then you need to do something about it. So what are you going to do then about what you know and what you see? And how do we put that in place? You know, we can use a whole lot of Montessori activities to support the learning of how to find your room, for example, or who family members are. You know, we can use task breakdown to get people to dress themselves. We've got people who are toileting themselves again and dressing themselves again by following a task breakdown on their wardrobe door or their toilet door. How amazing is that? Imagine the success for people. You know, one thing that people with dementia, or staff or families will often say, Dad doesn't want to do anything anymore. Oh no, or we can't get Jack to do anything. People with dementia often will not want to do things because of the sense of failure that they experience. When we set people up to fail, they don't want to do anything anymore. And so that's why Montessori is strength-based, and it's about enabling people to be able to do things at their own level with a degree of support. So you've got to put in place strategies. You've got to put in place strategies to support independence for people. You've got to support their memory loss, and I'll show you lots of examples of that. And of course, there's no point in doing anything in terms of independence, if it doesn't have the right outcome for people. Feeding themselves, so important. We can put in simple Montessori activities, which is basically just moving balls from here to here, here to here, then you put the bowl on top of another bowl and they move from there to there, then you use a bucket and they're going like that, then you move the position of the bucket to here and they have to put the ball there. That is that. If we can keep people doing those activities, then we keep people being able to feed themselves. Hanging socks out, being able to use your fingers. How can I pick up my spoon or my fork if I can't use my fingers? So those activities become so important to maintain independence for people. I always say, in this industry we've got to practice dementia tai chi. We've got to be able to move with the dementia and flow with the dementia. And as dementia is progressive and as people do continue to deteriorate despite our best efforts, we need to adapt practices, activities and schedules to meet their declining needs. So, people living with dementia can't be flexible, but we can. And I always say, just move with the dementia. What is important is this minute right now. And we need to remember that there is always a person behind the dementia. And who is that person? How do we connect with that person? Dr. Montessori said that joy, feeling one's own value, being appreciated and loved by others, feeling useful and capable of production are all factors of enormous value for the human soul. How true is that? And it doesn't matter what age we are, these things are important. These things are so important. We focus with Montessori environments on using preserved abilities. That's about that strength that I said. What strengths do people have? And how do we use those strengths to enhance quality of life and their independence? Modifying the environment, so important that we create a prepared environment for the person that is supportive of their needs. Provides information they can't keep in here. Ongoing education of families and staff. When we work with people living with dementia, we're also working with their families. Families need to understand the importance of keeping people independent. And as I said at the beginning, families are often just trying to protect people from failing. And so they step in and do everything. So I always like to, when I'm meeting people for the first time, get an idea of what sort of cognitive ability people have. So, can they answer simple questions like, how long have you lived in this house? This is a lovely house. How long have you lived here? Or how many children do you have? And what are their ages? And I'll be doing that, and if it's, say, I'll ask a man living with dementia, I'll say, and how long have you been living here? And she'll say, 12 years, darling, isn't it? Right? And so then I'll say, okay. And how many children do you have? We've got 4. So they talk for the person living with dementia. And it's not meant as something awful they're doing, they're supporting that person. And the same goes for doing things for them. So we have to pull back and work with families and let them realise the importance of independence. I work in aged care communities, and there was a lady who could feed herself. So I had a group of staff like you sitting there. I said, people need to do for themselves for their own independence. And one of the staff members said, it's all very well for you to say that. We've got a lady who can just still feed herself, but her husband comes in every day at lunchtime and feeds her. And we say to him, you shouldn't be doing that, she can do it herself. And I said, but why does he feed her? Why is always the question. Why? I said, what else can this man do to be involved in her care and to be contributing to her care? So I saw this gentleman and I went over and introduced myself and sat down while he was assisting his wife with her lunch. And I said, the staff tell me that she can feed herself. And he said, yes, I know she can. I know, but look, I come in every day and it's something I can do for her. He said, it gives me something to do when I visit and I can sit here and be with her and do that. And I said, did you know that I've got a couple of activities that I could show you to do with her that will keep her able to feed herself for a lot longer? Would you like me to show you the activities after lunch? And he said, oh yes, that would be a good idea. So after lunch I sat down with him with some very simple Montessori activities, moving balls as it was and picking a peg activity, that sort of thing. Anyway, what actually happened was that instead of him visiting at lunchtime when he would feed her, he would come after lunch and he would spend the afternoon doing these activities with her. He had something to do. And I was there about a month later walking through the activity area and he got my attention and pointed to the activity and yelled across the room, it's keeping her feeding herself, you know. So, you know, there's always a way to work with families to get them to move from creating excess disability to a point where they're actually enabling and supporting the independence that people need. Montessori environments support the person by meaningful engagement, independence, and activities. And then for the environment, we use a lot of cue cards, task breakdown to support independence, and signage. There is no doubt at all that we need to look at the prepared environment and realise the more impaired the person, the more the environment will actually account for their behaviour or what we see or what they're unable to do. Cue cards are things like my son visits me every day at 4 o'clock. I have a shower every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. I go to my doctor or the day centre or wherever every Wednesday. So cue cards support independence because what they say, what they can't keep in here, what people can't keep in here, and for people living with dementia that's a lot, we need to put out there. So we do that with things like cue cards. So when we give somebody a cue card and teach them to use it, such as my son visits every day at 4 o'clock, you haven't got the repetitive questioning of when's my son coming, when's my son coming. And so again, you've given people independence. You've given them the ability to find that information themselves, which reduces anxiety, which reduces repetitive questioning, increases independence and improves quality of life for people. So we use a combination of what the person needs to support their independence. There is no doubt at all that Montessori improves functioning. No doubt at all. If we leave people to sit and vegetate, that's exactly what they do. They deteriorate far quicker. We talk about push the brain to work, push cognition. We need to give people challenges that stimulate their cognition. And we have found that people improve without any doubt whatsoever. Their independence improves, just by putting activities in place. As I said, you can get people doing things again themselves, task breakdown. Now, again, none of you would like to have to rely on somebody to take you to the bathroom every time you needed to go. How amazing that we've got people living with dementia who can now self-toilet. What's changed is how they're supported and how we prepare the environment to enable that and to support that. So it's really about people being the best that they can be. Now, why do we do what we do? This is all about an understanding of memory, and probably there are people in this room who know far more about memory systems and memory than I will ever know. But basically, very simply, we've got two types of long-term memory. We've got declarative and procedural. Declarative is always impaired in people living with dementia. If it wasn't impaired, they wouldn't have a diagnosis of dementia. And that is what they can't keep in here, we need to put out there. So we need to support declarative memory. Our procedural memory, however, is a strength in people living with dementia. And procedural memory are things like our skills, our habits, classical conditioning and repetition priming. The more we do it, the better we get. The more we do it, the better we get. But the amazing thing about this is that for people living with dementia, they will be better at something every time they do it, even though they've got no memory of having ever done it before. Now that's an amazing phenomenon about our brain. So they don't have to remember having ever done it before to be better at it every time. So when we're looking at supporting people and supporting independence, we need to understand the more they do it, the better they get, even though they've got no memory of having ever done it before. It's an amazing thing, and that is such a strength. So you can reteach people to pour their own drinks or to dress themselves or to clean their teeth again or whatever it is that you wish to do. Realising that because they used to do it, that first of all they're going to learn it quicker, but secondly, every time they do it they're going to be better than they were the time before. And skills and habits. Skills and habits are highly practiced, that we've done skills over a long period of time. If I said to you, when did you all learn to clean your teeth? There'd be nobody here that could say, well, actually, Anne, I learned to clean my teeth on the 30th of August 1920. None of you will be able to do that. But, everyone in this room, you all learned to clean your teeth somewhere around 3, 4, 5, 6 years of age. And even if you've only cleaned your teeth once a day, since that time, you have cleaned your teeth thousands and thousands of times. If you are like me and other people and you clean your teeth 2, 3 times a day, then that's many, many thousands of times we've cleaned our teeth. So what can happen with people living with dementia is that they know they've got the skill of how to clean their teeth, but the problem becomes that they lose the declarative piece of the information, which is impaired, which is what they clean their teeth with. So, in aged care and looking after somebody living with dementia, you'll go into the bathroom and you'll see them standing there cleaning their teeth beautifully with a cake of soap, toilet paper, their hand towel, shaving brush, and we all go, oh! And then if you're not on the Montessori and you think, well, we need to clean his teeth for him now. You can't clean his teeth with, a towel. All we do is you support the memory loss by putting a sign above the toothpaste and toothbrush that says, please clean your teeth, or toothpaste, toothbrush. So again, you're supporting the declarative piece of the information that is missing. But if you watch them, the skill is still there. They've cleaned their teeth hundreds and hundreds of times, but they've lost a piece of information about what they clean their teeth with. A friend of mine is a cleaner, domestic, in a nursing home, and she got a job in a nursing home with 15 rooms and 15 en-suites, of which 6 of the en-suites belonged to men. So male residents in there. And she was going crook, and it's an Australian term. She was unhappy about all the urine that she'd have to mop up from the toilet, from the en-suites. And she says, she said, all I seem to do all day is clean up urine that's either over the back of down the wall or in front of the toilet. Now, why the behaviour? Why that? Little boys, again, I don't know the age, but they learn to pee standing up at some stage. And again, they've done it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. What can happen with dementia is that they forget the distance that they need to stand from the toilet. So they either stand so close that they pee over the top and down the back of the wall, or they stand back here. Now, again, looking through the Montessori goggle, all you need to do is put footprints in front of the toilet at the right place for people to stand. And you teach them that's where they stand. So again, that's another example. If people can go to the toilet themselves, they don't need to be taken. That's again about independence. So how we work in Montessori is really about what people need and how do we support the memory loss that people live with. Okay, now I've just got some pictures here of the sorts of supports that we would put in place. Now again, it's really about what do people need and how are you going to support that memory loss. Now, one of the things that often happens is that, which is people don't recognise themselves anymore. So you've got to be really cautious about the use of photos. Stirling University in Scotland is a university that specialises in a lot of dementia research, and they also contribute to dementia design. They are now promoting building bathrooms without mirrors, or cupboards that you've got a door that will swing right around. On one side's a mirror and on the other side's just a painted cupboard door, because so many mirrors cause so many problems for people with dementia. I could tell you that spend the rest of the weekend or the next week telling you stories about having to cover up mirrors in people's homes because they've got strangers living with them, they won't get undressed, they won't go to the toilet because there are people looking at them, they don't recognise themselves anymore. So you have to be aware of that when we're preparing the environment for people to support independence. Somebody won't go to the toilet if they think that somebody's watching them. Somebody won't shower if they think that there's somebody watching them. Amazing that inability to recognise oneself that occurs for people with dementia. Here are just some other examples of supporting memory loss. We always use, as you would know, photos or pictures are the most concrete of all. So we usually use a combination of pictures and words. Now, an interesting thing again about people living with dementia that people don't realise is that if somebody's been able to read prior to a diagnosis of dementia, they will be able to read late into the disease. Now, that's something that a lot of people don't realise, and so we assume that people can't read. If somebody's able to read, that opens up a whole world of working with them with task breakdown, signage, cue cards, memory books. Now, if somebody can't read, it doesn't mean we can't work with them. We just have to change how we work with them. I've done a lot of work with some of the nursing homes in the Northern Territory with Indigenous elderly people, and we've had to use signage with pictures, but we still achieve the same outcomes. It's just about what that person needs. So, you know, signing everything becomes important. This is a sign for a new Montessori unit that tells people how to get to the garden or not. Here is, how can I get myself dressed if I don't know where my clothes are? You know, I can't get myself dressed. So labelling becomes really important. And we always say to families, you need to get these strategies in place as soon as possible. Often families will wait until the wheels are fallen off. Too late then, you know, I talk to a lot of family groups and carer groups, and I say the first thing you can do as soon as there's a diagnosis of dementia is start getting support. Start looking at what you're going to put in place. Start putting things in place in the environment so that they become second nature. So that the person may not need that now, but as time goes on, they will need it. So, getting those things in place right from the beginning is so important. Here we've got an example of, this was the microwave. That was a gentleman who lived by himself and wanted to be independent with heating up his meals. He got annoyed that he had to wait until somebody came to heat up his meals for him. And he'd say, how useless am I? I can't even heat up my lunch. I've got to wait for family or somebody to come and help me. So we did him a task breakdown that went on top of his microwave, and we taught him how to use it. One thing that people living with dementia can do is learn. That's against all attitudes towards people with dementia. We often say they can't learn. Research has proved that they can learn, in spite of what all the nursing books and the medical books have told us for many years. Dementia is progressive, and eventually people with dementia will lose the ability to learn. But they're usually quite late in the disease by that stage. Anyway, this gentleman, we taught him how to use his microwave. Now he can heat up his meals whenever he wants them. It's improved his self-esteem. He's not quite as useless. I'm not as bad as I thought I was. That's how independence can affect self-esteem. I'm not as bad as I thought I was. I can do this now. And also we're now putting glass-fronted fridges and cupboards in for people living with dementia, so they don't need to remember what's in the fridge. They can see what's in the fridge. This is a new Montessori unit that we've just set up. And again, you can see everything is there to support the person. They don't need to remember, what to do. It's all there for them. So these are just examples. This is an example from the Japanese day centre. That's a toilet sign or bathroom sign for people. The picture on the right is a German nursing home in Victoria in Australia. Now, people living with dementia will revert back to mother tongue. It's not a matter of if, they will revert back to the first language that they ever learnt. And so in nursing homes with people from different cultures, we may have to use signage or cue cards or task breakdown in mother tongue rather than English or... Again, another story, a fellow who had moved out from Italy at the age of 7, 8 or 9 with his parents to the lucky country. They came out to Australia to live the rest of their life there, and the parents made a decision that because he was still a young boy, that they were going to speak English, so that he would assimilate, so that he'd learn English, and so that it would make the transition for him in a new country much easier. So that was fine. He spent the rest of his childhood and school life in Australia, grew into a young man, fell in love with an Australian girl, got married to an Australian girl. They had, 3 or 4 children. They knew of their father's heritage, but it wasn't something that they never learned Italian. They didn't celebrate Italian festive days or whatever. So basically, you get a picture of the life that they had. Then he developed dementia. And as his disease progressed, he lost his English. And there's his wife and his children, devastated, because now they were losing the ability to even communicate with their dad or her husband. So they're busy learning Italian words so that they can tell him that they love him, and it's hello, how are you, beautiful day, all of that stuff. People will revert back to mother tongue. So hence this picture, you'll see it's in German, as the signs are in German as well as in English. Now we can use Montessori activities, or we use Montessori activities to try and maintain English for as long as possible in people who have a different mother tongue. And so it's basically, or you'd be familiar with just the sorting activity of English words and Italian words, and he's got to match to the right template, the right word. So those things again help that maintenance, but it's not going to stop the inevitable disappearance of English from their understanding. Okay, wayfinders. These are just some examples of how it's so important for independence that people can find their way. I go into a lot of care communities around the world, and 9 times out of 10, it doesn't matter what country I'm in, there's no wayfinding in the bedroom areas. All the bedroom doors look exactly the same. And then the staff complain that the person's intruding into other people's rooms. And why? They're looking for something familiar. They're looking for their own room. So wayfinders and how to identify rooms becomes very important. The other thing that often happens for families is that once a diagnosis of dementia is made, let's say they've lived in the family home, a big rambling house that they've lived in for 40, 50 years, and they've raised their family there. In that house, the toilet's always been in the same place. What happens when people get a diagnosis of dementia is families, again with the best intentions, think, right, we need to move to a smaller place. This place is too big for Dad or too big for Jack. We need to downsize. We need to move to a smaller place. That is often a disaster. And the reason being that the house they've lived in for 50 years, the toilet's been in exactly the same place. Change the house, you change the position of the toilet. You change the position of the bedrooms. And that can lead to all sorts of issues. And it's about wayfinding. When I'm working with families with early stage, I say, if you're going to move, do it ASAP. Don't wait, because of that inability to orientate. We had a man who went to live with his daughter. His daughter said that she would provide care for her dad, but the issue was that she had a daughter herself who was a 10-year-old child, and Grandpa would wander in to her bedroom at night because he'd get up to go to the bathroom and he wouldn't know when to go back again. Now that was a major issue because the little girl was frightened of the fact that Grandpa's trying to get into bed with her, and there was no intention other than the man did not know where his bedroom was. But disrupting people's moving people can have major implications. So what we did there, the option was the daughter said, look, I can't have my father here. I can't have him here. I can't have my daughter and my children frightened at night. And I don't know when he's out of bed. So, we put in a whole lot of strategies, including painting his door so that his door was different to all the other doors in the house. We put signage up for him in the hallway that showed him where the toilet was, and we had a toilet sign. And until we knew that those things were happening, we put an alarm in that went to the daughter's bedroom so that when he put his feet on the floor, a pager would go off and she would know that he was out of bed. And that's how we managed that. Over time, the supports of the signage and the painted doors and whatever worked, and he was able to continue living there. So again, it's about what are people's needs and how do we address them. So wayfinding is very important. I just want to say, interesting, often people go back to what they've always known. This middle picture here is about vinyls that people choose their door. So they choose what front door they want on their bedroom. Now, they often will choose a door that is familiar to them, which is perhaps a childhood door, that a house they grew up in, and so that then assists them to find their room because they recognise the door. I just need to hurry here because I'm running out of time very quickly. Again, supporting memory loss. How do we use these things? What are they? You can see there the importance of contrast for people. When everything looks like this, with the changes that occur to vision as we age, you can see that people can't see the towels, they can't see the toilet paper. Whereas with contrast, those things show up. That's a new Montessori. There you are, there are light switches, the difference there, and how can people, turn on the light if they can't see the switch. So I'm just hurrying up here. Breakfast buffets in care communities, exactly the same as when we go to a hotel breakfast buffet and everything's labelled. Exactly the same principle, except we're going to do it in size font that people are able to see. That's a picture from China. Labelling food, again contrast with meals. This is a good example of a Montessori bathroom compared to a normal bathroom that often happens. People don't need to be able to find the seats, so it's clearly labelled for people, or people just helping themselves to breakfast, helping out. Life is given meaning by what we do. We need to remember that if people do nothing, then there's no meaning. These are some examples of cue cards, of the sorts of cue cards that we would put in place depending on what people's needs are. Visual cues, what do people need? Signage here, how it's the sign that triggers the behaviour. You can have a basket of fruit. People will walk backwards and forwards, and they won't think about having a piece of fruit. Right? But put a sign there, and the sign is the trigger. Oh, I'll have a piece of fruit. Things like that. Okay, just hurrying on here. That's a vegetable garden where everything again is labelled. So the people go out and work in their gardens, but they know that I'm watering lettuces, and I know that I'm, watering the cauliflowers or whatever it is. These are just more examples. Dementia clocks that are important about telling you what time of the day it is. Right? It's not just about having a clock, it's about having the time of day. My darling mother was living with dementia, and she went up to the church once a month to help look after the graves. And in Tasmania in January, 8:30 at night is quite bright because we've got daylight savings. So it's bright. She fell asleep on a bed one afternoon and woke up, and it was 7:30. And she thought, I better get ready to go to the church. So she got up, she had a shower, she took her morning tablets, she had a breakfast, and she went up to the gate, waited for her friend to come and pick her up. And her friend didn't come and pick her up, and she got worried. So she went downstairs, went back down to the house, and at that stage she could still use a phone. And she rang her friend Zoe, and she said, Zoe, aren't you coming to get me to go to the church? And Zoe said, yes, Dottie, I'll be there at 8:30 in the morning. And then I realised that my mother, back then, I realised that she had a problem, that when she woke up, when that happened, she needed a clock that actually told her not only what time it was, but what time of the day it was. Because disorientation, like my mother experienced, happens frequently. There's just some examples of name badges. Contributing to the wider community. People, just because they're living with dementia, doesn't mean they can't still be part of their community and contribute to their community. And in so many ways, if we just support them to be able to do it. Here is another couple of photos from the Japanese Day Centre. The Japanese Montessori Day Centre is next to a Montessori school, and the owner of the school has also set up the Dementia Day Centre. And so there's a lot of intergenerational activities that happen, and it is just awesome. It is just amazing to see that. So there are just a couple of photos from the lady with dementia cooking with the little girl and looking after the child. Here are just, these are just about people's abilities and skills and what people can do. The ladies preparing vegetables, you know, look, they're using chopping knives. They're all living with advanced dementia. We haven't had a laceration or an amputation yet. These people have been chopping vegetables for 50 years. Why is it that we think that because they've got dementia they're going to chop their finger off? You know, again, it's that attitude that transfers over. I just want to show you a couple of videos very quickly because I know I'm out of time. Almost, don't I? Yes. Okay. This is a lady with advanced dementia who we taught to use a template, and she operated a shop with another person with dementia. This is the magic of Montessori if we change what we do. And here she is, I hope this works. Watch her use the template. Everything she needs is there. She's supported in doing it. Now, I do need to ask you, please don't take videos of this. I have permission to use them for training, but not to share the videos around the world. So, just out of respect for Lil. So hopefully this will work. But watch her use the template. She says, that's yellow, that's $1. Everything she needs is in front of her. She doesn't need to remember anything.
Hello there. Here's bananas, please. Are you in there? That's lovely. And then yellow, just the $1. Perfect. Thanks very much. Beautiful. Thank you very much. I will refresh bags, please. Okay. That's it. And they're blue, try color. Thank you, Bill. Thanks for that. Good afternoon, ladies. We have 2 bags of fingers and 1 charity rod. That's the one. Now, I trust we've got enough money there for them. They're $1. $1. And $2. Yep. And goes $3.50. $3.50. $5.50. Ended up in the end is $5.50. That's what the day was. Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good, thank you.
Magic. That lady was severely impaired. And what she did when she wasn't in the shop were activities that supported her, the skills that she needed to operate that shop. So she did money matching activities and simple mathematics and things like that. Now I'm aware I'm out of time. I just will show you a very quick video. If people wish to stay and see it, that's fine. If not, thank you. And I will be around for any questions. Well, perhaps I should ask, do you want to see it?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So this is Montessori in action.
Wait,
yes.
Condition. If we stay to see the video, that means each one of you is going to need to pick up a chair when we're finished, because we have to clear this room.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Compromise?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Very good. Okay, here we go. That's all I can. But luckily there's
Somewhere miles are far behind. Be where trouble builds like lemon drops, high above the chimney top, that's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, and the dream that you did to, oh why can't I? Well, I see trees of green and red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Well, I see skies of blue, and I see clouds of white and the brightness of day. I like the dark and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. See friends shaking hands, singing, how do you do? They really say, I love you. I hear babies cry and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than we'll know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind. Be where trouble melts like a lemon drop, high above the chimney top, that's where